Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of NFL Dash. I'm Cody Schoeler here with Ryan Root as always, and we are going to get right into it. And actually, last week we missed the schedule release by a day. We were talking on Tuesday. Schedule release came out the next day, but it's still new enough to be talked about. So that's what we're going to go straight into that and just talk about some of the games just already that are sticking out to us and just the ones that maybe we are most intrigued about, most excited to watch for, whatever reasons, whether it's storyline, whether it's just two good teams playing. So, Ryan, I'll let you kick it off. I know that we have kind of pegged two week one games that we are interested in. So I'll let you talk about the one that you like.
So the one that I like more than the other, I'll talk about first. I think one that a lot of people are excited for is the Browns at Chiefs, week one. We got a rematch of the AFC Divisional game that was decided off of an Andy Reid trick play on a 4th and 1. So I think this is going to be a very, very competitive game. I don't think the Chiefs are going to have a cakewalk by any means. And I'm not going to – I still think the Chiefs are the favorites in this game. However, I would not be surprised if we see the Chiefs start off 0-1 to start off the season. I mean, I believe it was a couple years ago when the Patriots beat the Rams in the Super Bowl, in the most boring Super Bowl of all time. Week one of that season, I believe they lost, and people were like, "Oh, the Patriots lost. What does this mean? What does this mean?"
Chiefs beat them.
Yeah, the Chiefs beat. That's right. I totally forgot that it was the Chiefs that beat them. But I could totally see an 0-1 start for the Chiefs. That wouldn't shock me. Doesn't mean that the Chiefs aren't favorites to be the favorites of the AFC conference, but I think the Browns are going to come into this game hungry. They had a great draft, a great offseason. The Chiefs shored up that offensive line. It's going to be I want to see the defensive line and the offensive line just duke it out, really, because that's really where I think a lot of this, of the competition is going to be.
Well, and it's going to be, I mean, the Browns last year, they were kind of a sneaky team, people saying that they could be pretty good, I mean, it's the Browns. They kind of always get a little overreacted to, but they showed that they were a lot better and they were a playoff team. And so this year that hype is it's more justified in people saying, are the Browns ready to actually contend? They were great last year and people like what they did and they have seemingly gotten a lot better. So this is going to be a barometer for that straight out the gate of being like, obviously it doesn't decide the rest of the season for them, but if they really compete with the Chiefs once again, then I think it's going to be time to start taking the Browns seriously. And, so I think that's another reason why this is a pretty big game.
Also, I'm going to be keeping an eye on Baker Mayfield going into this game because I believe they exercised his option for, was it this year or the following year?
I think it's the next year.
Or the next year. Okay, so I'm picturing Baker Mayfield going into this game and thinking, yeah, I want to throw 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. I want to have a big game. I want to have a huge contract when the offseason comes up. So I could totally see that against Chiefs defense. That's not on the same level as the Browns. I can also see Patrick Mahomes wanting to, put himself back up on the mantle after a Super Bowl where it's actually the first game ever in Patrick Mahomes' career where the Chiefs did not score a touchdown on offense. So that being said, I'm sure Patrick Mahomes would love to throw 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. I could totally see this going a ton of different ways. What was the game a couple years ago? I believe it was Rams and Niners. Honestly, Rams Chiefs. It was like the greatest Monday Night Football game of all time.
Like 50 points all around.
I can see a sequel of that happening. And this is only a 1:00 game on a Sunday, but I think across all the 1:00 games, I think this is going to be the one that gets astronomically more viewers, and I can totally see why.
Yeah, the game that I'm interested in week one, and maybe not for the actual game, but for kind of honestly just the first snap of each team, but it's Packers and Saints because these are probably the two teams with the biggest question mark at quarterback right now. Obviously, with the Packers, is Aaron Rodgers going to be taking those snaps? And then with the Saints, is it going to be Jameis? Is it going to be Taysom Hill? And just what are these teams going to look like? There's two teams that were really good last year, but they are not guaranteed to be that good again. So I'm really interested in kind of what that looks like, you know, and obviously, I mean, I want to see who's taking the snaps, but, and, you know, secondly, that they're still two good teams, and it should be a pretty good game of two kind of powerhouse NFC teams for the last 5 years or whatever. So that is intriguing, mainly just for the storylines coming in at quarterback.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the biggest thing with me as well, considering we may or may not have Aaron Rodgers in a Green Bay Packer uniform on week one. And the Saints may have Jameis Winston starting week one, but maybe they could throw in even more Taysom Hill magic as the game goes on. So that being said, this is no longer, or this could be, so obviously we don't have Drew Brees anymore, but with Aaron Rodgers gone, this is no longer a awesome matchup at quarterback. This is now how are these teams going to fare the next 5 years or so? And honestly, if the Packers lose Aaron Rodgers going into this game, I like the Saints a whole lot more. I mean, I bet you Aaron Rodgers could put a win on their record, even on the road playing New Orleans. But if Aaron Rodgers is not in Green Bay and the Saints are hosting the Packers, I say the Saints take it with probably some fun plays on offense and a defense that is probably going to harass whoever is playing quarterback for Green Bay, whether that be Jordan Love or Blake Bortles that they just signed. So that is intriguing to me, like you said, with just the question marks behind it and how it could or could not be. It could be an all-time classic with Aaron Rodgers coming back and saying, look at me, I'm the best quarterback in the league. Or it could be we're seeing the first look at these franchises who were great for the past decade and a half. Yeah. So I totally agree with like that game is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and then kind of a few weeks after that, which honestly I think this is the game, might be the biggest game of the season for storyline reasons. It's probably the game that the NFL is just drooling over, you know, when they kind of created the schedule. But that is the Buccaneers at the Patriots, week 4, Sunday Night Football. Brady going back to Foxborough, playing against Bill Belichick after winning a Super Bowl without him. Gronk also going back. And I mean, obviously that Sunday Night Football, we're going to hear for a whole week just over and over again about this game, and that's exactly what the NFL wants. And it's warranted because it's going to be really interesting to see because like we've talked about and like, you know, people have kind of seen, I think Bill Belichick is a little fired up after seeing what Brady did without him. And this could be the game where, you know, he goes, I know this guy more than anybody, and I know how to stop him. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if he'll be able to do it, but if anybody can, it's going to be Bill Belichick. And on the other hand, you have Tom Brady, who goes, I know this guy more than anybody. I know exactly what he's going to do to stop me. It's going to be the biggest chess match to play out on a football field in a really long time. And so that is just absolutely must-watch TV. And I think that's going, you know, obviously the Patriots are not as good as the Buccaneers, but I think that is just a game that it's impossible to talk about the 2021 NFL season right now without talking about that game.
And going into this next year, now that we're kind of in the back half of the pandemic going on, I think obviously we're going to see a lot more fans in stadiums week 1, and this might be one of the first games that are truly affected by fans for the first time in a long time. I mean, sure, we talked about the 2 week 1 matchups, and the Chiefs fans will go crazy for Patrick Mahomes throwing 400 yards a game, but Patriots fans with Tom Brady coming into town on a different team wearing probably a red uniform, and that's going to be Foxborough is going to be absolutely insane, I think, towards Brady.
It'll be interesting to see how they react to him. Like, are they really going to boo like the best player in franchise history? Like, I don't know. Like, I think
picturing Boston fans, I think they would.
I think they still like him. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they'll boo him a little bit, but I mean, I don't expect it to be, you know, kind of these, like a lot of other guys that kind of force their way out. Like, I think a lot of them have kind of understand why Brady did it. But that'll be huge to look at as well.
I know this is a different sport, but if we're talking LeBron James coming back to Cleveland and playing, you know, they did not give him a warm welcome by any means. So, but
they would now. They won't boo him now.
They would now because, you know, he's obviously a different type of athlete than he was back then, much like what Brady was, much like what Brady is now. But considering they just won a Super Bowl, Brady just won a Super Bowl not wearing a Pats uniform, going into week 4. And the Patriots they're trying to have revenge this next season from just having a 7-9 year and not being in the playoffs for the first time in however long. So it doesn't matter who's at quarterback for the Patriots. All eyes are going to be on this Patriots defense, which has been at least above average for almost 2 decades now. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Brady, and I think he's going to play really well. I don't think the Pats win this game. I think Brady still comes in with his loaded receiving core and no holes anywhere on the offense or just the roster entirely. I think the Buccaneers still win this game. It's going to be a hard-fought game, and Brady should be thankful that this isn't a week 13 or week 14 match where it could be dumping with 4 feet or 5 feet of snow in Foxborough. So this is still early in the year. It might be a little chilly for him, but he's used to it. I'm more talking about the people who are used to playing Tampa half of the year. I'm looking at Mike Evans. I'm looking at even Antonio Brown. Like, at least this is a week 4 matchup that favors the Buccaneers a little bit more, I think. But back to what I said about the fans, I think the fans are really going to carry this game, and I'm definitely excited to see it. And of course, it's Sunday Night Football. You can't go wrong with one of those games.
Yeah, and the fact that we can talk this long about the matchup and not even bring in the fact that it could be Mac Jones, who might be the heir apparent in New England, playing against the guy that he is going to be measured up against for his whole career, possibly.
Belichick's probably game planning it right now in his office.
The storylines are just crazy. And so I'm going to move on to – I'm going to group these next 2 together, even though they're kind of far apart. But we have the 49ers playing at Chicago, playing the Bears in Week 8, and then the Jaguars playing at the Jets in Week 16. Both will probably be rookie-on-rookie quarterback matchups. Obviously, the Jaguars and the Jets surely will. 49ers and Chicago likely will. And with that matchup, you have the whole, 49ers passed on Justin Fields. They could have had him. They didn't. They went with their guy in Trey Lance. So I think that could be a really interesting matchup. And then, Jaguars, Jets, you've got 1 versus number 2. That's regardless of how crappy those 2 teams are going to be, it's going to have headlines just because of those. So those are 2, the teams may not be the best. Obviously the Niners and the Bears will be a bit better and could be in the thick of it. But, just the fact that you could have these rookie quarterbacks going at it, I think makes both these games really interesting.
This is going to be the most watched game for the Jets and Jaguars in I don't know how many years, I think. But not only just that game, but with the Niners playing the Bears, there could be a chance that both Fields and Lance play this game. I suspect Fields has a higher chance of starting before Trey Lance does. Trey Lance could be sitting out this entire year behind Jimmy G, but Jimmy G isn't exactly the healthiest quarterback out there, so he could be having his chance earlier than he expects. And Justin Fields, I know Justin Fields and the Andy Dalton situation reminds me a lot of the Tua Ryan Fitzpatrick situation last year, where Andy Dalton's going to start the first couple of weeks, and I think Justin Fields has a good chance of playing the back 60% of the season. So I think we have a high chance of seeing Justin Fields play this game, and going against that Niners defense, I feel kind of sorry for him. But Trey Lance going against the Chicago defense, that's kind of a similar story in and of itself. So if both of these rookie quarterbacks play off against each other with their defenses on the respective teams, I think it's going to be a very scrappy game, and probably is going to be a collective of less than 20 points maybe, but it's still going to be a fun one to watch to see if the Niners got their pick right. But the Jaguars and Jets, like I said, that's probably going to be, I picture it's going to be a sloppy game, and it might be a fun game, honestly, with Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence. I can't picture them making a lot of mistakes on their opposing team's defense and whatnot. But both those games are going to be great. If I had to pick one, I'm probably picking Niners over the Bears, and the Jets and Jaguars are so even. I'll go with the crazy one. I'll go Jets. I think the Jets might have the upper hand.
One of those teams have to win. It won't be like last year when they're trying to lose, but this could have drafts.
If Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence tie, that's going to be the headline of the entire next day.
And that could be a game with Rookie of the Year implications, being so late in the season. You never know. Whoever gets the better stats might have a chance. And then even like Trey Lance might not be playing in that Chicago game, but even if he's not, the semi Justin Fields kind of revenge game, chip on his shoulder, being like, you should have drafted me, because I think he for sure will be playing. It's week 8, almost halfway through the season. Andy Dalton's not the answer for the entire season, whereas, Jimmy Garoppolo could easily start the whole season, and Lance could just develop behind him for a whole year. And then we've got kind of a few games that are similar, just in being late games, down the stretch that could have some playoff implications. One that I pegged as particularly interesting is Chiefs at Chargers, Week 15. That's in my opinion, the best Thursday night football game. Because this division game, Chiefs will probably still be needing to win at this point. Chargers, if they're in the thick of it, they could be, competing for a wild card or something. But I just like that is the fact that it's Justin Herbert in year 2 could be remarkably better going against Patrick Mahomes in a matchup that we'll see a lot of times in the next, decade or however. I know there's some other ones that you like as well, kind of along that same line.
Yeah, that game, I'll just say, is really big for the Chargers more so than it is the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs very well could be clinched at this point in time, but judging that it is in LA, we could see a pretty competitive game between the two. And of course, it's a division game. But no, I also like Browns and Steelers Week 17. I mean, you can't go wrong with an AFC North rivalry, whether it's Browns, Steelers, or the Ravens, and maybe the Bengals can be kind of up in contention with them in the next coming years. They could very well be a new NFC West just in the NFC or in the AFC now. So I like that game a lot, considering Baker obviously is going to have a chip on his shoulder the entire season, I think, just like he has ever since he's come into the league, despite being drafted number 1 overall. This Browns team is very loaded, in the Steelers, I think I put it before, saying that the Steelers are kind of they remind me of someone who used to play like football back in their glory days, and were like, oh, I won the national championship in whenever the last time that the Steelers won the Super Bowl, and they're like, this is the glory days. We still have big men. We still have, I think the Steelers are kind of lying to themselves a little bit, and they drafted Najee Harris to kind of have like that fun draft pick and still be relevant. Like, look at us, we're still the Steelers, but the Browns will take that game, I still think, but you can't go wrong with an AFC North division game. And probably the last one I think that is really interesting as well. And this might go a little under the radar, but I'm thinking Raiders and Colts Week 17 could be interesting, considering they're kind of in the same not necessarily the same ballpark, but Raiders have always been either a step or two behind from making the playoffs ever since 2014, I think is when they last, or 2016 when they last made the playoffs. And the Colts just got Carson Wentz. They kept all their guys for the most part. The Colts are a dark horse to make the AFC Championship game. So the Raiders are going to come into this game with a lot of fire behind them. The Colts are obviously on their home field. This could be a make or break game for them as well. Actually, considering their division, they probably could be clinched at this point if Tennessee slows down a little bit going into this next year. But the Raiders, this is a must win for them. And considering it's so late in the season, I'm sure Gruden is going to be full force ahead to try to get this win over the Colts.
Yeah, and that Pittsburgh-Cleveland game, that's a Monday night game. I think one of the most, if not the best, Monday night game, especially with the playoff ramifications that late in the season. And yeah, I mean, any game when you get in the last few weeks where it's two playoff teams or two teams trying to get into the playoffs, those are always big. Obviously, Week 18 will have some really good matchups depending on what is still on the line with every team playing in their division. So those are kind of going to develop throughout the year. But, that Colts Raiders could definitely have some wild card implications for one, if not both of them, and then surely some division implications for the Colts. But we're going to go into some preview of the season, kind of just, nothing too particular, just going by conference, starting with the NFC and just kind of looking at each division. We've got team win total over unders. We've got odds to win the divisions kind of all listed out. And so Ryan, you can just lead with whatever you find most interesting of just kind of what the odds makers are thinking of this season.
So we might as well start at the top of what I got here. We got the NFC East, where judging off of last season, if it wasn't for the injury of Dak Prescott, I think the Cowboys were the favorite going into the year. But last year, the NFC East was just who is going to make the playoffs with a losing record for the second time in history. But going into this year, we got a healthy Dak Prescott. The Cowboys roughly got a little bit better on the defensive side. They're still kind of on the downhill with their offensive line glory days. But Zeke Elliott comes back. You still got CeeDee Lamb coming back.
Amari Cooper,
of course,
good offense, but.
They got a really underrated receiving core. If it wasn't for the Bucs having every superstar on the planet, it seems on the receiving core, the Cowboys and the Falcons, I think, are kind of up there with their receiving cores. But going into this next year, the Cowboys are the favorite to win the division over everybody, and I'm kind of sticking with that for right now, considering I think a lot of people still have in the back of their minds that, the Cowboys aren't going to be very good. They didn't even win that many games. Well, Dak Prescott's coming back. And everyone knows for the past 2-3 years he's had a chip on his shoulder. And I believe he got a small contract extension. Am I correct?
He got a big contract extension.
Okay, I'm thinking of somebody else. But
yeah, he did.
So this is going to be do or die time for Dak. And Jerry doesn't like to spend a ton of money in this situation. They really, tugged back and forth with this, but their win over under is a 9.5. I would say I'd probably take the over on that, considering who they're playing twice a year in that division. I picture the Giants. They'll probably trade games with the Eagles to win both games. In Washington, I can picture them winning both games, to be honest. But the Cowboys, I pick as the favorite here. In terms of a wild card coming out of this division, I don't see it happening.
No.
Like the wild card's going to come from the other divisions, but I'll stick with the Cowboys and take the over on their 9.5 win total.
Yeah, I really like Washington. They obviously made the playoffs last year with that bad record, and kind of somebody had to emerge from the depths of, just
but they didn't necessarily
division.
get better at quarterback, so that's what worries me most.
They got Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is not a long-term answer. But in terms of a guy who could take over a team that could possibly have the best defense in football, I mean, that defense is absolutely insane, could just take that over and guide them to, a playoff berth in a weak division. I think it's possible. They've got Taylor Heineke, who we saw in the playoffs last year. That's my guy. I've liked Taylor Heineke since his days at Old Dominion, actually. I was one of the few people who knew who he was when he started that game. But I just think that, it's kind of a weak division, and they have an incredible defense and could definitely win. And the Cowboys, even with Dak Prescott last year, they weren't really good. Their defense was just hemorrhaging points. Dak Prescott was having to throw for literally 500 yards to win. And while they got a little bit better, they added some linebackers and stuff. Their secondary is still really bad. I don't think they fixed that. So, I'm just not entirely sold on the Cowboys, which makes me think that I think they certainly have a higher ceiling with the fact that they have Dak Prescott, but I like Washington in that defense, obviously with, at a bit of a bargain, and they're at 8 wins. The whole division, Philly's at 6.5, Giants are at 7. I don't expect anything much to come from them. Maybe the Giants could get over that, and get around 500 if Daniel Jones really puts it together. But I think Washington, with that defense and, Chase Young probably only getting better, and, their offense is
and Terry McLaurin will have probably a big year going into this next year as well.
Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, they've got enough pieces, I think, on offense to put together a solid enough team around Ryan Fitzpatrick or whoever does end up being the starter and sneak into the playoffs with 9 and what would it be now? That would be 9 and 8.
9 and 8. Yeah.
Yeah, 9 and 8 or something like that. I think that could happen.
Yeah, I would stick with the Cowboys going forward. In terms of I see here on the Eagles win total, we have these odds from FanDuel of Eagles having a 6.5 win total. I take the under on that all day. I would be surprised if they get above 4, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Eagles going into this next season.
Considering Hurts fan.
It's not that I'm not a Jalen Hurts fan. I think there's a lot of lot of turmoil right now in that roster, in that front office. But I could be wrong. Hey, Eagles, prove me wrong. I'd love to see the Eagles fly.
I mean, they got Devonta Smith. You know, who knows? But I don't.
Yeah, that is true. I didn't take that into account. But Devonta Smith is. I don't
expect them. Yeah, don't expect them to factor it into it. But you've got the NFC South, where you have the Bucks with the highest win total in the NFC. They're at 11.5 with a -175 favorite to win the division, and I don't really expect that to go any other way. Obviously, last year they didn't win it. The Saints did end up winning it, but I believe they were, if not having the same record, only one game off. They were still had one of the better records.
Yeah, because the Saints destroyed them in both games.
So the Saints obviously are going to take a step down with Drew Brees. I think the Saints. I don't want to write the Saints off because, you know, I think either Jameis Winston or possibly even Taysom Hill, I think, can be good enough to still be competitive because that is a team with a really well-built roster. But, I mean, the Buccaneers, when you're a Super Bowl champion returning every single starter on both sides of the ball, I mean, it's hard to not see them being just as good again. I think the only thing that could stop them is if Tom Brady just falls off a cliff. And, you know, as we've seen older quarterbacks do, it's not, you know, for any other quarterback, it would not be crazy. For Tom Brady, it's obviously crazy. I think that's the only thing that is preventing them from winning this division again.
Yeah, and if you want to hear my hot take for the division, I don't know how this will go about, but I think the Panthers are a dark horse for a wild card here. I have a lot of faith that Sam Darnold is going to defy a lot of expectations going forward. The Panthers have a very underrated receiving core with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Christian McCaffrey comes back. They have, you know, I think an upgrade at quarterback with Sam Darnold over Teddy Bridgewater. The defense, I guess, is still a little bit of a question mark, but I really like the Panthers going forward across. In terms of the offense, I like it. The defense, of course, they're still kind of figuring some things out, but they have a 7.5 win total on here. I would put $5 down on an over on there. And, you know, go out to a nice dinner with my win. But I like the Panthers going forward. I mean, the Falcons with an 8 win total on here. Sure, they got Kyle Pitts. They got a new head coach, which who knows how that's going to work. Arthur Miller, who knows how that's going to work out. Defense is still. I
like Atlanta.
They're going to be a lot of fun for sure. I mean, they're going to be maybe that's where the air raid should go next is Atlanta, because I bet you it'd be a ton of fun. But you know, I would take the under on the 8 for Atlanta because I don't trust them to. I'm not saying that they have a Dan Quinn, you know, curse on them, but they got to play the Bucks twice a year. That's 2 losses. They got to play the Saints twice. I think that's another 2 losses. And the Panthers, I think they would trade games with. So that's 5 games right there that they're going to lose. 17 minus 5. That's already 12. And give or take, they're going to play a good team here or there. I'd take the under on the 8 there. But in terms of a wild card, I think we could get a wild card from this division. If anything, I think the Saints are the favorite for a wild card out of here. But I would keep an eye out for Carolina. I think they may shock some people.
Yeah, I feel that way about the Falcons. Just, I mean, Matt Ryan is.
This is a really interesting division this year. It's not like last year. It is interesting going forward.
I mean, yeah, you've got the Bucks and the Saints at the top. That probably doesn't change. I mean, the Saints could be a lot worse. You know, they're at, is it 9? I believe. I think that's probably around where they'll be. Just. No, that would be.
We got to see if Taysom Hill can throw a touchdown pass first before see if they get a wild card.
And I mean, Jameis Winston could easily be really good. I mean, he's a talented player, and maybe in that system he can do great. But the Falcons, I mean, you've got Matt Ryan, who's a proven quarterback, former MVP, took a team to the Super Bowl, so he showed that he can do it. And last year they had a really bad record, but they played in a lot of close games. Like they just couldn't win close games. So there's a few games that really could have gone, you know, one way or the other. I mean, they beat the Cowboys if it's not for an onside kick, and there's a few that go one way or the other. So I think they were better than their record suggests last year. And I mean, you know, who knows, with the new coach really getting stuff together, a little bit of improvement on the defense and a really dynamic offense, I think they could possibly get a wild card. in that division. You know, the one thing that I think is holding, you know, the Falcons and the Panthers back is the fact that they're in a tough division and they have to play the defending Super Bowl champs and a really tough Saints team. I think if either one of those teams were in, you know, definitely the NFC East or, you know, maybe even the NFC North, I think I'd like their chances a lot better. But the NFC North has obviously the Packers there, who don't even have a win total listed because I think of so much Aaron Rodgers stuff going on. They're not even going to let you bet on their over-under win totals, but they still are the favorites at minus
even with all the turmoil. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I think when you think about it, even if Jordan Love is that quarterback, I mean,
they still have Devontae Adams. Ideally, they would still have Aaron Jones.
Are the Bears or do the Bears or the Vikings suddenly become the best team in that division? Just even with the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, I think it becomes a worse division, a more wide open division, and you know, I don't expect them to get a first round bye or anything, but I still think the Packers are the team to beat, regardless of who's quarterback. But I also think that Aaron Rodgers will be the quarterback.
See, I think the Lions are going to go 17-0 and win the Super Bowl.
I think switch those two numbers around. That's more like
no. The Lions are still gonna be battling there in fourth place.
I think they could be the worst team in football this next year.
I mean, we'll have. I mean, they have a win total of 5. Under. I would probably take the under on it.
I would take the under 100%.
If I'm looking at the odds here quickly to win a division in the NFC, they have easily the worst odds, and it's almost twice as bad as the Panthers winning the NFC South. That's really funny. But
the only team, the Texans and the Bengals technically in the AFC have worse odds for their division. But I mean, the Lions are in a bit of a more open division, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, the Lions, they can be factored out of any conversation regarding the NFC North.
So the NFC North, I think, is also interesting. We got to take into account there's 3 wild cards. Okay, so before we even get to the wild card, the division winner, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, it's 100% in the bag. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back, I'd say it's probably about an 80% chance because I think there's at least a chance out there that the Bears may have a breakout year. If the Bears could have a Chargers situation from last year where Tyrod started off the year and then Herbert kind of took off. Well, they had to play the Chiefs twice a year. So disregarding that, if I'm translating that into the Bears, if Justin Fields starts the back 60% of the season and plays a Packers team without Aaron Rodgers, it's not the Chiefs by any means. It's a little bit of a step down. The Bears could be a surprise to win the division if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back. If he comes back, better luck next year. In terms of the wild card, though, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, the wild card conversation is interesting. There's only 3 wild cards per conference, which, I mean, we're getting to the next division in terms of the wild card conversation. But with this one, the Vikings are always an interesting team in terms of the roster that they have. It's like they seem to have someone on every unit that is well above average, if not Pro Bowl, if not all pro level.
They have a really good roster.
They have an amazing roster. And the reason that I think the Saints could make the playoffs all these years with their awesome roster is with the coach and the quarterback. And you look at the Vikings, we're talking Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer. Not saying they're bad at their positions, but with the amount of roster help they have there, the fact that they're not a 10-win team every year is a little questioning. So I would still think that the Bears have an upper hand considering the Vikings' recent trends. The Vikings win total of an 8.5. I would honestly take the under because although they have the great roster, I mean, what was the big conversation surrounding Kirk Cousins for the longest time? He couldn't win with the world watching, couldn't win in prime time, couldn't win against above 500 teams. Justin Fields, with all the momentum he's got going forward, and of course, we've said it before, he's another guy to have a chip on his shoulder. If Justin Fields ends up starting for the Bears, I would take them over the Vikings to potentially be that wild card spot. But I mean, it's still an interesting division nonetheless if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back. If Aaron Rodgers does come back, I mean, we'll just see who's going to battle for second place.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a Bears team that has been a playoff team, I think, both of the past 2 seasons on the backs of an incredible defense and just trying to scrape together an offense. So if Justin Fields comes out the gate and is really solid, then they could easily be
they don't have what's his face anymore, the receiver, Allen Robinson anymore.
They do. They
still
tagged him.
Okay.
So I mean,
I bet he's not happy about that. But
there's a real possibility that if Justin Fields is good out the gate, then they're a really solid team. And the Vikings, I think if the Bears struggle, then that opens it up for the Vikings to possibly get a wild card team if we see somebody from one of the other divisions struggling, including the next division, the NFC West, which has every team projected with at least 8 win totals, with the Cardinals being at 8, and then
which I honestly think is a little low for even them.
Seahawks, Rams, and 49ers all at 10 or above. And I mean, honestly, I know we'll get to some other stuff, but if I'm looking for value out of anything, the Cardinals at plus 600 to win the division is probably the best value out of anywhere. I don't think that's necessarily possible, but they are a very talented team that, could possibly do it. I don't think they will, but they're good. They got better. And I mean, this division probably is going to be very wide open just in terms of every team being good.
How do we want to tackle this, Cody? Because there's a little bit of background bias involved in this, but we can at least agree that this is the hardest division in football. Mm-hmm. And considering, I think I saw the numbers a little bit ago that in the past 2 decades, an NFC West team has been in the Super Bowl, I think like 8 times or something like that out of the past 20 years. So that being said, I mean, the Rams are the favorite to win a division. The Niners are the favorites to win the division.
A slight, very slight favorite.
Very, very slight. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it's all dependent on the quarterback situation, I think, for the Niners. It's all dependent on – I mean, the Niners could have very well won the division last year if it wasn't for injury Armageddon that happened to them. The Rams obviously had a huge improvement at quarterback with Matt Stafford. They lose a couple of pieces on defense, but they're still a dangerous team. And then the Seahawks, they actually supplied Russell Wilson with some stuff to work with. The defense got a little bit of some losses there in Shaquille Griffin, and but they maintained that defensive line, that pass rush. So, and then the Cardinals got what's his face at receiver? AJ Green, who's very injury prone, but that's still you got Larry Fitz, D Hop.
He retired. Larry Fitzgerald retired.
His spirit will live with the Cardinals organization. Yeah. But Kyler Murray could be a dark horse for MVP going into this next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Judging off of last year in the first third of the season, he was shocking everybody. I mean, he had that classic matchup against the Hawks earlier in the season last year. This division is so open. If I had to pick, I can honestly see the Rams being the favorite to win if I could look at both of these, and we're talking nickels and dimes in terms of who's going to be the favorite, Niners or the Rams. I picked the Rams just based off of obviously the Niners have a good defense as well, but Matt Stafford he's got a way better supporting cast over here in LA. Matt Stafford brought the Lions to the playoffs a handful of times, and I don't think people really understand how. That being said, I think the Rams are the favorite to win the division. In terms of a wild card, I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of them got it, because
it's very possible.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is a division with 10 wins in each spot. I mean, it just doesn't. There's so much competition that happens here. I predict that there's going to be 2 wild cards from this division.
I think
just by itself.
Yeah, pretty safe to go with 2. I also think the Rams are probably the team to beat. The 49ers, I'm just not confident in them at their current spot because of the quarterback position, but I do think they're going to be a lot better with a healthy defense, a healthy quarterback, whoever that ends up being. So I think they're, if they're fully healthy, then they probably get a playoff spot. But I mean, I like the Rams, but I mean, the Seahawks, they could, win the division as well. I mean, this is probably the only division where any team could win it. I mean, maybe the NFC East, if you want to just talk about how everybody's so bad that they could win the division. But this is the only division where everybody, this is the only division where any team could win it because of how good they are. So I wouldn't be surprised if anybody takes that. And I don't know what to make the playoff odds are, but I mean, each one of them is a really good bet. And the Cardinals, I think, like I said, just projected to be the worst in that division. That could certainly not be the case, just if they take some steps. But we're going to hop over to the AFC now and go back across the country. AFC East, which, I mean, last year was interesting for maybe the first time. This year, maybe not so interesting because the Bills are on top of that division and will likely do so again. They're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, one of the best teams in the NFL, with Josh Allen playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and a team that didn't return everybody, but returned a lot of pieces, don't really have a lot of holes. I mean, that's just a team that is going to be really good. They're at 11 projected wins. I mean, probably go over. I don't know what their schedule is, but you got to think, especially with the extra, I believe they were around that last year, if not more. And as an extra game, I don't expect them to be less than that. But it gets interesting behind them because the Dolphins were a team that were in the wild card mix for a lot of the season, narrowly missed out. And the Patriots, who many people thought could, make the wild card at the start of the year last year because Bill Belichick is that good. Obviously they weren't, but they had a lot of issues. But I mean, if Cam Newton plays well or if Mac Jones plays well, that could easily be a playoff team. So I think without the top being interesting, this is one of the more interesting divisions.
The Jets will just be happy to get above 2 wins, I think.
I cannot believe that they are 6.5.
I think that's way too high to have them at 6.5. I mean, I know Zach Wilson is a game changer for him, but I mean, if I'm looking at, let's see if okay. I don't want to spoil it yet because we're going to talk about the division next, but the Jets, I think they're just going to be happy to get above 2 wins this next year, which I think is entirely possible. I will still absolutely take the under on 6.5 though.
Yeah, it does not make sense. For a team that had, I mean, the only reason they didn't have the number 1 overall pick is because they blitzed on a Hail Mary. This was probably the worst team. I mean, it was certainly the second worst, if not the worst team in football. And all they did was add a quarterback and a guard and, some pieces. Like there's no, I mean, I guess Robert Saleh, good coach, but he's not ready. Good
coach, but he's not a miracle worker.
This team's not going 7-10 in the first year. Like they're much further away. So
they're not going 7-10 because 6 of their losses is going to be in the division. But I don't even think they're going to win any of the division games. Yeah. And they're going to lose. Them losing just 4 other games in the rest of the schedule. I mean, I'll be happy to see the Jaguars and Jets face off later in the year. But
that'll be a fun game, but it won't have playoffs.
I don't even know if they're the favorite in that game either. So how am I supposed to sit here and say that they're a 7-win team? But in terms, the Bills are the easy favorite to win this division. I think they are coming back with a vengeance, just like the Browns. So this whole, kind of, I don't want to call it a love triangle. We'll call it a hate triangle of the Chiefs, Browns, and Bills is just going to be one of the biggest storylines going into the AFC. The Patriots also are kind of creeping around the corner. Whoever starts at quarterback is going to be a discussion, but the Patriots could be a dark horse for wild card. I would still pick the Dolphins to go over the Patriots to be in that wild card position, going off of the Dolphins were in that mix, like you were saying. A lot of attention is going to be put on Tua to perform, and Tua, I mean, I don't think he's going to fail this next year. I think he's going to have an improvement this next year. I think he's probably working really hard with that coaching staff to be more of a dynamic quarterback in the NFL and not throw 140 yards a game. It's just not going to cut it, especially not in a division like this. They gave him some more weapons. The Dolphins are going to come back with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder. I could maybe see a wild card in this division, but we haven't gotten to some later divisions that have a lot more competition. But those are the favorites. I'd pick the Dolphins as a dark horse for a wild card.
Yeah,
but, I mean, the Jets are going to be happy to get 4 wins. There's no way they're going to get 7.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Dolphins, I mean, Tua is probably the most polarizing quarterback of this entire year. Obviously, you have some rookies, but, if they struggle, that's okay. But Tua is coming into this year with a team that is built to succeed now. I mean, maybe not Super Bowl succeed, but they've got an incredible defense with Brian Flores. And so Tua's going to have to come in and play really well now, or it's going to be time for them
And Tua
to maybe
is the
even move
AFC
on from
version
him.
of Daniel Jones right now. They
Yeah,
have
and
the
I mean,
same storyline going forward.
Yeah, but Tua is on a better team, a team that is projected to get have a winning season.
If Tua was in the NFC East, though, they'd probably be the favorites to win the division.
So I mean, the Dolphins' chances I think ride on him. If he struggles again, they don't have the Ryan Fitzpatrick to bank on. So I don't think they make the playoffs without him. So that's, I think, going to be the biggest thing to watch is how does he do? Because the dude is incredibly talented. He's supposed to be very good, but he has not been great. But moving on to the AFC South, which is probably from top to bottom the least interesting division, at least in my opinion, because you have the Colts.
Less interesting than the NFC East. You heard it here first.
I mean,
absolutely.
At least the NFC East, I think, has more teams that could,
because everyone's on the same page.
Something.
They all just want to fight to the top.
I mean, even when the Eagles and Giants are bad, they're still the Eagles and Giants. They've been good, but when the Texans and the Jaguars are bad, I don't care about the Texans or the Jaguars. But you've got the Colts and the Titans basically fighting at the top of the division, and the fact that the Jaguars, who were the worst team in football last year, are not even projected to be the worst team in this division.
The same win total as the Jets.
Says a lot about the Texans and how terrible they are. So, I mean, I don't even want to talk about the Texans. They're at 4 wins. They're going to go under that. I don't care if Deshaun Watson plays or not. He probably won't.
I don't care if he throws 6,000 yards and breaks the passing record. I would still take the under.
The Jaguars, 6.5. They'll be under because they're just not ready. Maybe they'll get 2 wins against the Texans, and that'll help. I mean, if Trevor Lawrence is incredible, maybe they get to 7. It's a little bit easier to do this year, but I still don't really care.
We're a little more favorable with the Jaguars as opposed to the Jets. The Jets should not even be in the same realm as this.
The Jets are in a good division.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
The Jets could get 6 wins if they were in that. Because I mean, the Jaguars could beat the Titans or the Colts for 1 game. Neither of those teams.
They did last year. I mean,
exactly. They beat the Colts in week 1 and that was lost every other game. But I mean, the Colts and Titans at the top is one of the more intriguing battles for winning the division. In the fact, I mean, that there are 2 teams that could win the division, as opposed to you've got the Bills and the Chiefs that are and the Buccaneers even that are probably just going to win it. But I mean, I really like the Colts. I think they were the better team last year in some ways, and you add in Carson Wentz, who should be really good. Jonathan Taylor was great down the stretch, and a defense that's pretty solid. And the Titans, I mean, this is a team that lives and dies on Derrick Henry, and it's Derrick Henry, so you can do that. But how you don't see teams rely on their running back rushing for 1,000 yards in the month of December. That's not really a way to build a winning team. So I like the Colts. They're a bit of a favorite, still plus 100. But I think the Colts will take that division. But the Titans could easily get a wild card spot.
I disagree with the Titans. I think they're going to take a dip this next year. I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they lost their head coach going forward.
No. They lost their offensive coordinator.
Or offensive coordinator, that's what it was. So
Arthur Smith. But they still got Mike Vrabel.
Right, because Arthur went to Atlanta. So the Ryan Tannehill magic might be out the window at this point. I don't know, but it could very well be the case. The Titans were embarrassed in the playoffs last year. They were not ready, and they had a very miserable pass rush, even with a former number 1 overall pick in Jadeveon Clowney. The Titans' defense is still a question mark. And it's a rush offense that is effective, but going against the Colts twice a year, I can absolutely see a loss in both occurrences. Texans and Jaguars, sure, you guys can get those wins there. And maybe you could trade a game with the Jaguars. But their win total prediction here is at 9. I would take the under on that all day because I don't think that they're going to be a favorable contender for the wild card. I would pick the Dolphins over the Titans to be a better wild card spot. I would pick the Patriots over the Titans.
You really think that? So they've got 2 games against the Texans and the Jaguars. That's 4 wins. You think in the other games they only get 4 wins? That
could be 3 or 4. I don't know if the Jaguars trade with them, but let's go with 4. Sure. I mean, 4 and then give or take a couple of games here or there. I mean, it would be close. I would still take the under on 9. I would give them 8, but them being in the wild card discussion, I would put the Patriots over them, and the Patriots don't even know who's going to be the starting quarterback going forward. Really, I mean, I would take the under on the Titans, and them being a wild card in the discussion for wild card, I think is a little silly. But that and then what I said about the Colts earlier, the Colts could very well be in an AFC division game with one of the top 3 AFC teams, and could very well be in the AFC Championship game.
It all depends on Carson Wentz.
All depends on Carson Wentz. Absolutely, that's going to be the question going forward for this next
But
season.
I mean, if you want, you can't talk about the AFC wild card discussion without talking about the AFC North, which I mean,
yes.
can you guarantee that 3 teams are going to be in the playoffs? I mean, certainly one will from winning the division, but Steelers, Ravens, Browns all figure to be in that discussion. The Steelers are the team that is at least expected to slip off and maybe not make it, but still, I mean, I think they could get in. But I mean, Ravens, Browns at the top of that division. I like the Ravens a lot this year as kind of
they're creeping up into
I like
that juggernaut.
I like them as a second tier Super Bowl team. They're not up there with the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bucks and the Packers if they have Aaron Rodgers and those teams. But I like them as kind of that second tier team. If Lamar Jackson can get back to what he was 2 years ago, I mean, he is the same player. He can still run. The offense kind of didn't really do him justice, but if he can get back to being that type of player, the defense can be really good. Once again, like it has been, just a lot of the time they have an incredible defense. I really like Baltimore as a team that I think could, be one of the better teams in the league and really compete for an AFC championship.
Yeah, Ravens Browns I think is the best doubleheader kind of face-off in a division in the entire league. I mean,
they had that was the Lamar Jackson taking a poop game last year.
Yeah, it was at the Bills division game, right? I was going to ask that.
No, that
was the Browns game.
Yeah, the regular season, Lamar Jackson went to go take a poop and then came back and led them to the win. So that was a great game. I mean, that was an incredible game last year.
Yeah, so I think the narrative surrounding Lamar Jackson is, can he win a Super Bowl? Can he be that next, franchise player that Patty Holmes was? A lot of eyes are. I mean, the Titans were the whatchamacallit, the absolute sleeper team 2 years ago to take down the Ravens. And then the Ravens did not have a favorable game against the Bills. So I think they're slowly but surely creeping up into playoff contention. And that being said, the Browns are right there next to them with absolutely zero holes across their entire roster. They gave Lamar Jackson some help in the receiving core and on the offensive line with their 2 first-round picks. That's going to be the interesting spot to see who wins that division. I'm picking the Browns, honestly, because I think the Browns have a lot more momentum behind them, but don't think that they have like a tiebreaker or something. Don't think that this could very well be like a Saints-Bucks situation from last year where they have a very tight race, but one team could win over the other both times, and I could picture that being the Browns. In terms of the Bengals being 6.5,
wow.
Hot take, I'd take the over on the Bengals.
Yeah,
I think
they're in a tough division.
Burrow's back with Jamar Chase. I'm not going to say that they're going to win the division or be in the wild card, but
as you should not.
No, right? It's
nobody should be saying
him
that.
Being back with Jamar Chase. The team got a little bit better. It's still going to be. They're still going to scratch and claw their way up into contention, but I take the over on 6.5. And then the Steelers being a wild card. I'd give them a dark horse to be a wild card. More favorable than the Titans, I'd say. But
I don't think they shouldn't be favored to be in the playoffs. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is still a team that was 11-0, 12-0, and I know they faded down the stretch. But if Ben Roethlisberger comes back and plays solid, if he's got a ton of weapons around him, the defense certainly lost some pieces, but you've got T.J. Watt, one of the best defenders. Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best defenders. I mean, so this is a team that
Steel Curtain is still active. Yes.
Yeah, I mean this is a team. I mean, they're not the third best team in. I mean, most of these other divisions. They happen to be in probably the second best division in football, and so that hurts their chances. But I mean, if you told me that the Steelers won the division, I would be, I'd be like surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked. It probably takes something bad happening in the Browns or the Ravens for that to be. But I mean, this is, the Browns. I still think that, Baker Mayfield, we're going to need to see him really put together, because honestly, the Browns kind of were the, Titans light with really relying on Nick Chubb to be the guy for that team. But they certainly have really upgraded the defense that needed it, and they have vaulted themselves into the top tier of that division. But the last division we have, AFC West. I mean, the Chiefs are at the top of that division. They're going to be at the top of that division. They're the biggest favorite to win their division in the league.
The highest win total prediction.
Yeah, I mean, and 12.5, I mean, do the Chiefs lose 5 games? Do the Chiefs lose 5 games? Like, really? Like, I just don't see it happening. They're so good. I mean, they lost a bit, I guess, but I mean, they remade the offensive line pretty well. I don't know what they're, I think any issues and problems that this team have will come up in the playoffs, not the regular season. I mean, it's very difficult to beat. I mean, just Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid together is an absolute juggernaut. But it does get really interesting behind them, because the Chargers, are certainly a team that, just based on what we saw last year, can be really good. Justin Herbert is, quickly becoming one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and they did a really good job at filling their biggest needs this offseason. The Broncos are the team every year that we think could finally take that step forward. Quarterback has been holding them back. Obviously, if they get Aaron Rodgers, that changes everything in the whole division. But still, but I don't think that's very likely to happen. But can Teddy Bridgewater get them to a wild card? Maybe. And then the Raiders, they are not favored to do pretty well, but they seem to be more competitive than we expect in most years. So I think behind them, it's a really interesting. If you take the Chiefs out of the equation, it was just these 3 teams in the division, it'd be interesting to see who would emerge on top. But you have the Chiefs at the top. That's not going to change. But, there's some scrappiness behind them.
I see the win totals of the Broncos and the Raiders, and it intrigues me, considering that the Broncos are the ones that are 2 wins ahead of the Raiders.
It's because of
the Aaron Rodgers dilemma.
It's because of them possibly getting Aaron Rodgers. And the Raiders don't have that bump, but I think the Broncos are more likely.
So the Raiders are at 6.5, which I think that's very low. I would take the over of 6.5.
Yeah.
I think the Broncos and Raiders, those win totals should be flip-flopped.
Yeah,
obviously
Broncos under.
Off of Aaron Rodgers. Without Aaron Rodgers, this is like a 6-win, 5-win team, even with Teddy, because Teddy's a bridge quarterback. He's not going to take them to new and unforeseen territory or anything like that. He's an improvement from Drew Lock. They still got stuff that they need to figure out. It doesn't mean that they're on the decline or anything like that. Making the move for Teddy was great. That being said, the Raiders, I'm not going to say that they'll be a wild card contender. They could be maybe in the 8-win range, and maybe I can picture them being in the same range as kind of the Vikings were last year, where they're still kind of up there and a little relevant. But
that's kind of where the Raiders were last year.
The Chiefs are the Packers in this situation, where the Chiefs are the clear and obvious favorite. The Chiefs are trying to get right back into that Super Bowl and get another Lombardi trophy. The Chargers, I think, across the entire conference, other than the NFC North having, I think, at least one wild card, the Chargers are right there as like the second highest wild card, I think, in the entire conference. The Chargers, I think, are going to take a huge leap forward. Justin Herbert could have, I've said it before, the second year explosion at quarterback. We saw it with Lamar. We saw it with Patrick Mahomes. Now, it wasn't a second year necessarily for Josh Allen, but now Josh Allen is in the conversation to be a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback. So,
like I said, Kyler Murray did it last year.
And Kyler Murray, right.
So there's always somebody.
There's a trend that has been happening the past 5 years. And that could very well happen with Justin Herbert. They shored up the offensive line tremendously, I'd like to add. They still got Austin Eckler back there, I believe, and they still got Keenan Allen to throw to. I mean, the offense is going to be interesting. The defense is going to come back healthy. I can see the Chargers trading games with the Chiefs I could see them
almost-
sweeping the Broncos and maybe
almost
trading
beat
with the
them last
Raiders.
year.
Right.
They almost
Yeah.
so yeah. I mean,
And
that's
the
definitely
Raiders
a team.
the Raiders are responsible for the one Chiefs loss. So
The Chargers did beat the Chiefs.
That's right. It was
week 17.
Week 17, right? I
when
don't
they
even
were
think
playing
Patty
all their
Holmes was
backups.
playing, right?
No,
Yeah.
God, no starters were
That's
playing.
right. Sorry, I live with the Raiders fans, so the one loss that the Chiefs had for a while was in the back of my mind at all time. But
that was a legit loss.
Yeah, the Chiefs are the clear favorites here.
Yeah,
but the Chargers are going to be right up there next to them. But I think this conference is a little bit more spread out in terms of who's going to be in the wild card spot across the divisions. And then there's the NFC West, who's probably going to take up the entire playoffs. But it'll be interesting nonetheless. Well,
that is all 8 divisions, all 32 teams. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, you can check us out again. Next week, we will be back here with NFL Dash once again. And so check us out. Thank you for watching.